Hi, everybody. This is your first breakout session of the day. Is everybody excited? Good, because this is going to be a great one. So I would like to welcome you all to the best room, breakout room E. I'll be here all day, and some other speakers will also be coming, so it should be a good time. I want to introduce our first two speakers in breakout room E this morning. And they are two people from whom I learn a lot myself. So let's bid them welcome. Willkommen, bienvenue, buenos dias, and hola. Please welcome to the stage Vitor Pellegrino from Duolingo. He is a staff site reliability engineer, or SRE, and with him, Erik Peterson, the CTO of Cloudzero. And they're going to talk to you about aligning Duolingo's cloud architectures with strategic business goals. Please welcome them to the stage.
There we go. Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. All right. Who's ready for an interactive conversation? And this should be a conversation. We're going to try to leave some time for questions and get into the details. This is a topic that Vitor and I absolutely love. We've been dreaming about having this conversation with everyone here. So let's get right into it. There we go. We know who we are. So, Vitor.
Yeah.
Hallo, wie geht's?
Ja, gut. Selbst?
Na,
Dankeschön.
super.
Yeah, so if you did not understand, you can try Duolingo to learn a little bit of German. I highly recommend. That's how I pick it up. So yeah, my name is Vitor Pellegrino. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. And I work, amongst other things, also with our FinOps practice.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm Erik Peterson. I'm the CTO and founder of Cloudzero. And about 200 days ago, when Vitor told me he would do this talk, I promised him I would keep my streak alive. I'm proud to say that I managed to do that. I am also practicing and learning German. And I absolutely love your platform, man. I'm based in Boston, but these days, I think wherever the airport is these days. But I absolutely am crazy passionate about this. I founded Cloudzero about 8 years ago to get at this challenge. Like, how do we get engineers more engaged in this conversation? Because they're the ones who are making the buying decisions. I love this idea that we should all kind of internalize that every engineering decision is a buying decision, right? And the engineers actually have more power to build efficient, profitable software than anyone else in the world. So, all right, well, magical moving on its own. So why are we here? Well, I wanted to get a couple things out of the way first, to kind of set the stage and get us to a place that hopefully connects us all in some way to this. Actually, Vitor and I had a question, coming into this. How many people in the audience are on the engineering teams, on the engineering side of the house? Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. That is wonderful. That's something that I think we need to see more involvement in the FinOps Foundation and community at large. You all are making the buying decisions. And the decisions you make will ultimately set the stage if you're building profitable businesses and innovating. So why are we here? How did we get to this place? Why did we want to start having this conversation? Why do engineers need to be part of this conversation? And well, I'll start with this. How many people live the DevOps dream, right? Kind of wondering like how they could be more connected in shipping software. And DevOps came along and solved the problem, and we stopped throwing stuff over the wall to ops. But this became the new reality, right? It worked fine for us. We weren't necessarily connected to the costs, and it's now finance's problem to solve. If you're like me, I spent a lot of time in the principal's office, so to speak, getting yelled at by my CFO, who was asking, why has the bill gone up by $30,000? Oh, we had a bug. Didn't realize that. That was a $30,000 bug. It never happened again. Next week, why has the bill gone up by $60,000? Oh, another bug, right? There's more scrutiny over the expense reports that we'll file this week here in San Diego than the API calls that we're making that are actually spending the money, right? And this reality, for many of us, can't be the reality if the cloud is going to be successful. If this journey that we're all on together is going to be successful. So we have to make this our problem, or actually our opportunity to build very efficient systems. And there's two ways to think about it. For a lot of us, we started out thinking about how to buy better. RI, savings plans, discounts. How do we buy the cloud? Can we get more efficient about that? Can we lower those costs by deploying RIs or using spot instances or just turning the lights off on the weekend? But from an engineering perspective, it's something that we call engineering-led optimization, where we can zero in on the largest sources of spend that are connected to the technical decisions we're making and align them back to the business. So we want to expand beyond that and get really into how engineers can drive this process. And it's not just one or the other. It's truly both, right? We have to apply a strategy that takes both sides of this equation and brings them both to the business so that you can build these efficient systems that we're talking about. Now, one metric that we're going to cover a lot today that's very much tied to the engineering conversation is how should engineers interact with this? I'm spending $10 million on EC2. I don't know if that really means anything. What we want to have a conversation around is metrics that matter for the engineer. And what we're talking about here is unit economics or unit cost. It's easy to say, oh, I'm spending $25 million on EC2, but 25 cents per transaction when I'm in the business to do transactions is a way more powerful metric for us to understand, both in the conversations we have internally amongst our teams, but also the data that we share back to the business. That's a board level metric. If you're an engineer and you're providing that kind of insight into how your systems are performing, you are literally moving your company towards a more strategic path. This is really the bridge, and that's what Vitor is going to be talking about today, is how Duolingo found a way to bridge the gap between the islands of data in finance and the islands of data in engineering. Unit economics is that Rosetta Stone. It's the Duolingo of FinOps.
Thank you.
When is going to be the FinOps? Oh my God, it's just an amazing idea. Just had it right here on the stage. We're going to build a module for this. It's the Duolingo of FinOps. I love it. And another thing that we all kind of need to think about how we get at these costs is if I'm going to do effective unit costs and unit economics, I have to be able to allocate and attribute that spend to things that matter to the business. Again, how much money I'm spending on EC2, not very interesting. What I'm spending for transaction, for product, for service, per customer, things that matter. And so that's something very near and dear to my heart because at Cloudzero, we focused in on this problem first. We wanted to build the most effective system that you could program to align your costs directly to your environment. We actually built a language, we called it cost formation, that allows you to allocate your costs to the teams, the peoples, the products, the services, and the unit demand drivers that ultimately move the needle for you. So I wanted to share those little details about us and about why we're up on stage here before I give the stage ultimately to the people who are the most effective voices in the FinOps community, which is the practitioners, all of you, and most importantly to us, our customers. A lot of companies have come to us trying to solve these very hard problems, trying to understand how they can allocate their spend back to the people who are spending it, but more importantly, connect those technical decisions back to the business outcomes. Because at the end of the day, we want to innovate. Nobody gets up in the morning necessarily and wants to save money. They want to make money. We all want to make money. We want to build innovative products. And I think cost is one of those very powerful constraints from an engineering perspective that allows engineering teams of any size to get back to innovating. Constraints breed innovation. We have and live in a world of infinite scale, thanks to the cloud, but I do not have infinite wallet. If anyone here has infinite wallet, come see me afterwards. I want to come talk to you, but nobody has infinite wallet as far as I know. We have infinite scale, but we do not have infinite wallet. So this constraint is very important when we have this conversation about engineering. So I know no better way to tell that story than for me to not talk and let Vitor share the stage. So please, thank you, Vitor. Come on up here. Here you go.
All right. Oh, thanks. Yeah, as Erik was introducing, this was like a long journey for us. And I'm going to present a few stages in this journey. Like before we actually started, the first steps that we've taken, a few of the challenges that we were facing, and also what we did to solve for them. But I mean, do not let me fool you even for a second. This is also like work that we're doing, and then we're also going to present what we're thinking next. So just getting started here, like a little bit about Duolingo. Actually, like a show of hands, who here knows Duolingo, knows a little bit? That's great. Who here actually uses Duolingo? Wow. Oh, thanks. Yeah, for those who don't know, like Duolingo's mission is to create like the best available education and make that also accessible like to as many people as possible. So it is the largest education app in the world, and I'm going to present some numbers, like 31.4 million. That's the number of people that learn daily with Duolingo. Like they're either like for business reasons, personal reasons, stay connected with their families, whatever that is, like 31.4 million people use daily. 97 million, a little bit over 97 million use that monthly. So that's the scale that we're talking about. 700 is the number of employees that we have, give it or take. And half of these people, like myself, they are engineers. So, and the application is usually like what people think of Duolingo is what we call like the language learning app. But if you're like a non-native English speaker like myself, you might have to take a test to show that you are able to join like a college or a university somewhere. We also offer what we call like the Duolingo English test. So these are the two main business units. They share a few things, but they are like almost like separate business altogether. And we have hundreds of microservices because of the scale we're talking about. Like some of these services, they take more than two digits, millions requests per second. So this is like the scale we're talking about. And a little bit more about the architecture. Like we use different cloud providers, but the vast majority is actually with AWS. And for some teams, we have many different SaaS providers. So it could be like your observability tool, your whatever you have, like security and whatnot. Like for some teams, that's actually like a very representative part of their spend. And yes, that's mostly it. Like it's actually very simple. For those who are wondering, like we do not use Kubernetes. So we use Amazon ECS. But I can talk about that later if you want. So the challenge is that when we started this process, we had a few things that were actually problematic that we wanted to address. The first thing is actually was hard to understand our costs. Like you could see like in your top level bill at AWS how much you're spending on EC2, DynamoDB, whatever have you, but knowing that per container was simply unknown of. So people were just having troubles understanding exactly where the money was going, what they could do to improve. And we also went through a massive growth period, so it is the cost, like the feeling that we have about what would be like the right cost, like was a moving target. If the bill doubled next month, like people would be still puzzling whether that was a good or a bad thing. So we had no idea. And cost overruns were also missed by months, quarters sometimes. Like if you folks do any kind of like quarterly business reviews with your vendors, like that was often when we found that something was going awfully wrong. So this is something that was just like an everyday thing for us. And our first thing was to how can we create like a FinOps culture with such a small team? And when I mean small team, I mean like a third of my personal time. So that is like what we had at our disposal, right? So we just had a few basic things, a few milestones, but that was pretty much the main challenges that we had. And because we all know we're practitioners here, like that FinOps is all about culture, like let's actually start to take a look in the Duolingo culture, what we're actually used to build this practice upon. So we have this thing at Duolingo called operating principles. Some companies, they call these things different things, like I believe Amazon calls them leadership principles, but that's just the way that we take decisions, we prioritize work, that is actually used on a daily basis. For us, there are 12 of them. I'm not going to get into any specific details here, I just wanted to call out the 4 ones that were like mostly the driving factor force behind this work. So these were the things that we're going to do. As I said, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but so you know, like the culture that we have at Duolingo favors being very explicit about which kind of like goals we have, how we're going to measure this, and this is something that is widely understood. And another important thing is like we are very much a product and engineering-led organization, meaning that the product teams, they have loads of autonomy. I sit within the platform area. That's where the FinOps practice sits as well, together with like dotted line with finance. But the point being like we create best practices, we create reusable modules, like we create like a lot of things, but it's up to the team's discretion whether they're going to adopt that or not. We don't have a way to just say, okay, you shall not do this. If they really want to break the glass or, I don't know, move away from our abstractions, they can do that. And as I said, with the test it first, one of the operating principles, that's how we do things. At any time, since the Duolingo's inception, we had A/B tests going on, like 12 years ago. And right now, at any moment, like we usually have like hundreds of experiments happening, like A/B tests, or all those things, they can also impact costs. And another important thing, the first instinct that people have at Duolingo is usually like to automate things. Like thinking about processes doesn't really sit well with people. So that's just the reality that we're dealing with. Usually people just go and then start coding something to kind of like try to automate the problem away. So that's what we had, and that's where the starting point of our FinOps journey. And the first things that we did towards this journey, like I actually want to start with like a show of hands. Like who here agrees with this statement? It is hard to encourage people to take actions. Well, according to one of the last FinOps surveys, like that means like 40% of people think that that's a top level concern, like it's a very hard thing to do. That wasn't exactly the thing for us. I think for us it's actually this thing. The right action was very hard. As I was saying, like it favors automation, it favors experimentation. So people are eager to experiment and do things. However, that was hard for us to actually tell and point people to the right direction. Like it was hard for us to say, oh, by the way, if you want to spend like time, fix this thing that has like so much more advantages than fixing whatever you have near you. So trying to figure out what actually were the right actions was the tricky thing for us. But why did we find ourselves in this situation? I think like there are a few things that I'm going to say that we did. I'm definitely not saying that you should do it, but that's what we did, and I'm here to tell our experience.
Why is it that a number of engineers raised their hands saying it's hard to get engineers to take action?
There's something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we did this thing called like cloud cost savings incentive programs, like a mouthful. But the whole point thing, like we actually incentivize engineers to find cloud cost savings by actually giving them like incentive, like monetary incentives. When I saw this thing, my reaction was a little bit skeptical, to say the least. I'm going to talk about the things that we brought us, like was successful in some points, and then there were some points also that, there were also like disadvantages with that. But anyway, that's what we've done. I'm not sure exactly whether like this would apply in any single kind of culture, but for us actually, it saved millions of dollars along the way. Like this, if you only look at the cost savings, massive success. However, actually, more importantly, introduced the topic engineering minds. Like, I think I found some documents in the beginning where people were saying, okay, wow, great. How do I actually find how much stuff are costing? Like, these were the actual feedback that people have. Like, that's great, but I have no clue. I might not have even permissions to get access to the console to see my costs. So these were actually a good way to start, like paving the way to further activities. So the problem was like it led to a lot of tools that we simply had no control over. Like some people were like fetching parts of the bill, trying to join with like some telemetry data, and then coming to a conclusion, extrapolating container costs based on whatever heuristics. So, and then we had like several. I mean, when I joined, I counted like about 4, I guess. And each one of them were just like giving like wrong data. So this was actually very hard for us. And also created like some weird incentives. Like I think if I managed like the largest service, like I had so much more opportunities to do cost savings than people like doing, I don't know, internal tools. So that was a little bit weird thing. We didn't like that. And more important, like it wasn't really propelling our culture forwards. It was just something like that people were saying as a almost like a separate action. I did the whole thing, I do a little bit of optimization now, and then I got some money, right? So what we wanted to do, like we want a cost to be part of any service consideration. I mean, if it is not cost efficient, might as well not be even properly designed. So we wanted to actually figure out a way to weave that kind of like that thought about costs into our engineering culture and our decision making, right? So that's why we decided, okay, actually, let's regroup. We don't do this incentive program anymore. Let's think about something a little bit more long term. So as I said, we need cost to be part of every engineering decision. These are all cost decisions, purchase decisions.
It's buying decisions.
Buying decisions. I all get this thing wrong.
I've been giving Vitor a hard time about this. Every engineering decision is a buying decision.
Yeah, I love this quote. I just misquote that every single time.
We have to translate this into German.
Well, maybe. Yeah, and then we also had far more vendors as just cloud providers. I mean, let's say, I don't know, inventing like an example here. Like if, let's say I run the observability team and I moved from like doing internal Prometheus or whatever have you, but I'm moving that to an external third party. Like with the tooling that we had, we would just lose the that visibility. But at the end of the way, like finance and engineering, they need to report on the whole total bill, not just AWS or whatever cloud provider, right? So, and also like the thing that was key for us, like the cost went up. Is this bad? Is this good? Like we needed to have something that told us about the efficiency and not only the cost. So which then led us to like unit of economics. Well, here's doing anything with unit of economics. Okay, not a lot of you. I hope some of this is going to be interesting. Yeah, so for us, we needed like this, as I said, like a North Star metric. We needed something that just told us where we were trending in the right direction or not. And because we already had a lot of things that were measured in terms of daily active users, just felt like the right place to be. Like, well, actually, let's do cost per daily active users. But, surprise, we were already doing that. We just had no clue from an engineering side. You know, like finance was already calculating this, was already reporting on these numbers. It was just not widely accessible. Like, it was just something that most of the engineers, and at that time, including myself, and I was tasked to lead this FinOps practice, didn't know we were already doing it. So we had, usually when an engineer heard about cost per daily active user, it was just like a bad surprise, right? They never heard about this before, it just turns out like it went bad, so why? Oh. So what we did, like, before it was being calculated once a month by finance, we needed to ingest that automatically and calculate that on a daily basis, do like forecasting, all of that, like build all of that into our cloud visibility tool, which happens to be Cloudzero. And we wanted to make that accessible to every other engineer in the company. We wanted that to be part of the daily discussions that people had. So that was pretty much our idea. Oh. So yeah, implementing unit of economics, like I'm going to show a few architecture slides. I mean, I know like a lot of you are engineers, but if you're not, I think that should be easy to follow. It's mostly like only a handful of components. The first thing is actually we have like a Lambda function that runs once a day. And then all it does, as I said, like, I mean, to have unit of economics, I actually did not say that, but I'm saying that now. It is important to have also like the source of your business information. Like unit of economics is a way, as Erik was saying, like to enrich that information with things that matter to your business. As I said, in our case, cost per daily active users. It could be whatever you want. So
yeah, key thing is that there's two sources of information
exactly.
here, right? When you go down this path, you're correlating data that is about what your customers, your users, the people in the world who are using your products, what they're doing and how they're interacting with your system. That data may live in completely different places. It doesn't live in the cost and usage report that you get from your cloud provider. And you have to correlate these two sources of information together.
Exactly.
And Vitor, you're the guy who built it at Duolingo.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you build it?
Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, so as I said, it was mostly like a Lambda function. We use BigQuery to calculate this information is our solution for it. And once a day, it will fetch all the daily active users for the past day. And then we will send this information to Cloudzero using their APIs. And that is actually how we ingest this data to our cloud visibility tool. It's only like those three steps.
I love how simple this diagram is.
It is really simple. Yeah, this was something that I did in an afternoon or so with Python. The important thing, as Erik was saying, like it is that you have your business, your business metrics, whatever you have, like you have a source that you can pull this information from. Once you have that, it's usually easy. We do that with Cloudzero. Yuri is going to speak here today later. Like he has like an amazing workshop that they do that with using other tools. So I highly recommend speaking to him. And yeah, I mean, this is the monthly cost per hour trained. As you can see, this is extremely critical data for us. This is definitely not real data. It's just like for illustrative purposes. The whole point being like this became so central that if I showed you even like some trends with some blurred numbers, that would be probably like some sensitive information. This is something that we look at on a daily basis. We actually verify that with leadership, and then that's how we did it. So the cultural impacts of this. Kaylee is one of our engineers. She was literally asking for API access for this. So this for us was a great incentive. It's a great pointer that we are going to the right direction. And if you folks are seeing like engineers asking for APIs, ways to pull the data, at least like in our culture, that means like great success. So for us, like this is actually engineers that are looking to pick this data, ingest that somewhere is more, I don't know, like they want to go crazy with that kind of information. So that's really good for us. And along with the business KPIs and the unit of economics, we also track FinOps related KPIs. I just sample a few, like we use the cost per CPU core, and also the amount of commitments that we have. You can find all of these in the FinOps KPIs toolkit, which I highly recommend. It's a great resource. And and we also track how often people are using our cost visibility tool. So results so far for unit of economics. It has been a great success. Addressed the biggest challenge that we had, which is the efficiency over time. And is also, as I said, a key metric in our decision making, right? One thing I want to call out for that is important is what we've been calling unit drift. So, which is the idea that the models, they can go stale over time, even though they are correctly calculated. So for instance, we calculate the cost per daily active user, right? But AWS doesn't charge us for daily active users. They charge us for resources. And let's say we do a marketing campaign, just inventing an example here. We do a marketing campaign and now people are spending twice as much time within the application. That is going to artificially increase our cost per daily active users, even though we did not become less efficient. So this is something to be aware of. This is something that we've been thinking about. And then whenever we create those units of economics, we also plan for revisiting whether the conditions around them are the same. If for a banking application, I don't know, you do perhaps a cost per transactions or whatever you have, just make sure that all the other things, they're still the same. Otherwise, you might be misleading yourself. And as I was hinting towards, we're still trying to find the right combination for us. This is great input, cost per daily active user is the most important things. But whenever we actually go to the next, I'm going to talk more about the processes that we have around this, but I'll just, for now, whenever I present this information, I always look at many other different sources. I look at KPIs from the entire business, anything that is happening around that to understand and help me understand what is behind the trends.
Yeah, I think the level of analysis that you guys have done, it's really fascinating because it's important to think about what's really correlated to your costs. And sometimes what you think is driving things might not be what's driving things. You might learn something. So it's always this kind of fantastic journey to dive through this, now looking at your costs from a different perspective, and then ask the questions, why, right? Architecture decisions, marketing, somebody else outside of the process change something. Do you have a strongly correlated metric or not? You have to constantly be evolving your view into that.
Exactly. Yeah, and also because we have the ability to do it, people are looking for more metrics. Something that we're working right now is having a cost per request. So we would like to be able to normalize, on average, a Python service costs more to run than, a Java service or vice versa. These are the kind of things that we're trying to do. And teams are asking for more things. They want us to see cost per experiments. They want to see cost per CI/CD builds. And this is being a liberating thing for us. We know that we can do it right now, and teams have been taking advantage of it.
When do we get to cost per customer at the FinOps X conference 2024? That's got to be the most profitable segment of your business, right?
Yeah, that would be amazing. So that was a unit of economics. I want to talk now about how we actually made that be part of the engineering decisions. So we have this concept of cost reviews and reporting. This is a very important part of this exercise. And we have different levels with different personas involved. So monthly, we do cost reviews with the area leads, the lead departments, engineering or subsections of the engineering areas, and also with the leadership. So in the leadership meetings, finance and FinOps, in that case, represented by myself, we present this information to the leadership. And then with the areas, we help other leaders within the engineering teams to present that within the areas. Sometimes we also present them as well. And each team, they get a report of all their spend on a weekly basis. So this is the first slide of the monthly cost reviews with leadership. This happened to be a quarterly view. But as I was saying, this is what we do with them. And
how did those conversations go before you started bringing unit cost into the conversation? Before, I have to imagine you just showed up and said, we're spending X on ECS, right? It
was a lot of head scratching. It was a lot of okay, is this good or bad? That was just the way it was. So the thing about this review with leadership, if you want to see the format, it is the same every time. And this is exactly the slides that we go over every single time. So because it's useful to know like a cadence, like it is the same thing, people know what to expect. So the idea is like finance presents the first part of it, like we compare the forecast, we see how we're trending, any budgets, and then we go for like many different line items. And when we start to look at hosting costs or things specific to cloud costs, we take over and then we run like cost per daily active users, cost per daily active users, like contribution to the cost per team, and then we go month over month, areas, teams, highlights, lowlights. So the important thing here is not necessarily like the format, but like this idea that we want to establish like this trust advisory model. Like this is with the leadership team, but also with the areas. The important things are actually the discussions around these things. So we are actually looking forward to have like the same information, present that back, and facilitate a conversation to see whether there are any surprises, anything that was eye-opening. And we wanted to use cost actually as a way to drive this concept of operational reviews. As we're saying, like if it is not cost efficient, might as well not be well developed. So this is just cost was kind of like a leading metric for this and a way to start these reviews. So maybe, I'm not sure if you're aware, but PagerDuty has a lot of good documentation about different topics. And their open source framework for operational reviews has been a great inspiration. We just augmented that with costs, and that's what we're using internally. The problem with this is hard to scale with a small team, right? As I was saying, like our idea was to do that with the minimal amount of people dedicated to it as possible. And doing all of this kind of like training, preparing documentation, investigating, explaining, correlating metrics does take a whole lot of time. So our approach has been the train the trainers models. So we have SREs in different areas, and our job as FinOps is actually to create the information, to present the overall top-level insights, and to provide these SREs within the areas, like actually with all the data pertaining to their areas, so they could do those reviews directly themselves, and we're there like also to consult and help along the way. This is something that we're working on right now, but it's kind of the direction we're going towards. Like we want to do, like what people say, it is also very, it's I would say even like it's the state of arts nowadays for security. The same idea that we're going to train advocates and cost-related advocates for this kind of work. Another key thing is internal evangelism. This was a blog post that I wrote towards the end of the year, like to talk about the kind of like optimizations we did over the break. And the idea for this is to amplify people's voices. Like let's say a team did a remarkable job, like doing cost optimization. We actually want to broadcast the information. Like I sit with the team, I try to understand their story. We try to put like a nice narrative around it. And that is something that is being also very important and highly celebrated. And also like we have like an internal Slack channel that whenever people, this is something that happened like also organically. We did not encourage that. If I knew, I would definitely have encouraged that. But it is a channel where people literally just post like, oh, by the way, like we saved however much money because we did this thing. Everybody does like a lot of like emoji reactions, everybody's happy. So this is what we're actually doubling down on, and is also like a vital part of this process. Like people want to be celebrated, people want to do that kind of work that actually leads to the kind of healthy virtual cycles that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think one thing we were talking about earlier was, just the other day, was about how engineers, all of us building systems, we all want to do the right thing, right? And you put the data out there so that they could access it, start building things, see the connection between a well-architected system and a cost-effective one, and how that really enabled that. And then almost organically, they started celebrating the wins. You can't forget to celebrate the wins. Small, big, large. It's super, super impactful for everyone to understand how they're ultimately making the business. You're not just optimizing cost, you're optimizing the business, right? And that is so much more powerful when you think about how one engineer can have such an enormous impact on the profitability of your company. Yeah,
exactly, and that's what people want to do, right? Our adoption, talking a little bit about like the impact and the results of this, our adoption has been incredible with the teams. This was, I would say, like the biggest goal for us. We have like a group, as I was saying, like they self-organize around these incentives, around like the cost savings. And they are actually like, we have a monthly meetup that they organized, and I joined as a guest, just to talk about what we're thinking about these things. And they're actually like curating a lot of those best practices. They were figuring out ways to encourage people to do cost savings. Last week, in fact, we had our first engineering summit, internal one. And I wanted to have like a talk about like the cost savings best practices. Like there were already two in the other tracks, so I didn't have to put that in mind. So this is the kind of thing, it's a testament that people actually really liked the level of visibility that we offer, liked our efforts to amplify their voices, and that's the results. Another thing, and yeah, I mean, I would say like another thing that was important, is not here in the slides, but our cost overruns, they don't happen as frequently anymore. So, which was also like a big thing for us. So before, as I was saying, it would take sometimes a quarter to find something. We had a big cost overrun that would have cost like many $1 million in annualized spends. We caught that in 48 hours. So this was something that, like after the vendor told us like that they found something, we already had addressed that by a month and a half. So these are the kind of things that we're now in a position to tell them that something happened, that we already addressed and identified, find the right people to solve them. And yeah, that's just also something very important that we were able to achieve. And lastly, our cost per daily active user has been going in the right direction. And this is something that was never like a clear stated goal for us. Unlike many people, we never had a goal about cutting costs. We just wanted to know that we're operating like a tight ship. Like we wanted to know that we actually have a good control of our spend. We know where that is heading towards. We can already identify what would be the things that we could optimize if we had to. And we were able to achieve that. And then the cost per daily active user decreasing was just a factor of all the other things that we've done, right? Was never the clear stated goal, but it's just also a pleasant surprise. And what is next for us? As I said, this is an ongoing process. An important thing we're looking at, we're very excited about focus. If you're involved with that, or if you're not aware of it, it is a way to kind of have a common, shared, agreed upon interface over the cloud costs in the billing across providers. And we're very much looking forward to use that as a way to unlock more experimentation. As you've seen with Kayleen, and sharing her ideas about using the APIs, we see that as a way to have and offer better tooling so people can look at their observability vendor, their cloud provider, their security provider, all within the same kind of tooling, and they can reason about that.
Yeah, don't stop with just your cloud costs or the big CSPs, but everything that contributes to COGS and operational costs.
Yeah, exactly. And for some teams, actually, the cloud cost might not be even the most relevant thing for them. We did see them. We have some teams that one cloud provider is a negligible amount of spend, but the other one is the vast majority of it. We've seen people that they moved a lot of the in-house built software over to third-party vendors, and then because that is not tracked anywhere else, it would lead them to make some wrong decisions because they don't have the visibility, right? So this is the thing that we want to explore much further. And lastly, some of our practices aren't up for scale yet. As I was saying, a lot of stuff involves manual work, analysis work. One advice that I received, and I think is applicable here, is we, in this age of AI, is very tempting to try to automate the reasoning part, but that is actually the most important piece for us. I would tell you there wasn't a single cost review meeting that there wasn't an aha moment. I cannot recall of any one of them. With the teams, with the areas, I would present the top movers, and they're okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, this service should be costing half of what it is. And then 1 week afterwards, you get an email with them thanking you because they now addressed some that they had no clue that was happening. So I think trying to automate that is not really where we want to spend our time. We're looking more to automate the data collection, preparing the documents, and actually doubling down on the human-to-human connection, and working alongside your peers and trying to understand what is actually behind the numbers. The numbers is the easiest part. That's what we should automate, but I believe there's a place for us to provide these as a service to our organizations.
We can just clone you. That's
maybe, or maybe clone you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. Some parting thoughts.
Yeah. So why don't we share a few parting thoughts? Just to kind of build on what Vitor was sharing here. it may have started out in finance. In fact, engineering not even being aware. They probably had that big spreadsheet where they're just doing that simple math. And I don't even know if it was accurate. Probably when you looked at it, you're like, I don't know. It's not really database. It's just built around this. So if you think that unit economics is just for finance, it's not. It's actually been one of the secrets to, I think, your success on the engineering side. And I think that's one of the most important things I hope people take away from this is, if you're trying to get engineers more engaged, you need to put this into context of things that matter to them. The big number about how much money you're spending in the cloud, not useful. But the unit metric that's driven by whatever demand drivers there are for your company, that really changed and up-leveled the conversation and made them more accurate. And don't just look at it on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis, or I'd like to see hourly. It's very, very powerful. There's a whole bunch of cultural aspects to this as well. I think Duolingo, you guys you have an amazingly healthy culture. There's a lot of just like a love of learning and exploration. If you're going to introduce this into your own organization, though, you're going to have to map it onto your culture. You're not necessarily going to change that culture overnight, or that's a hard thing to do. So I wouldn't tell anyone to go out and try to change their culture, but figure out how to integrate this into your culture and make that part of that conversation. And then turn them into champions. Build on top of that. And over time, you might find that things don't scale. You might find things that don't work. Don't let, good enough, perfect be the enemy of good enough. Get started, because ultimately, I think we all understand, particularly in the engineering mindset, that we have to iterate on this. So this has been fantastic, Vitor. Thank you for sharing the stories. I would like to know if there's any stories that we could share with the audience, if anyone has any questions that they'd love to ask us right now. Right over there. The question cube.
We have the question cube.
Rob, just throw it at him. Yeah.
So thank you for that presentation. You mentioned scale a couple of times, and the number of requests you're getting, not being able to scale that within your team, and how you use train the trainer. So I'm wondering, does train the trainer mean primarily focusing on showing people how to use, in this case, the Cloudzero platform and write their own reports, or are there other things that you needed to train them on as well, like the data structures or like where the data is coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean here exclusively like the cost piece. There are aspects of this, but we see that as a separate step. We're concerned about training them to lead the operational reviews in that aspect, but on the same time we do have extra best practice around using specific technology for cost savings.
So then you're teaching your requesters, finance, product management, how to use and do analytics and write their own reports and dashboards, or it's not quite there?
You mentioned democratizing this, right? You want people to be, you don't want to be a gatekeeper to this information, right? So I think, yes, you want to make sure they can use the tool effectively, but that honestly wasn't the main thing. I think, when I look at from my vantage point, what Vitor's done over there is just get everyone to understand the importance of cost as a non-functional requirement, as a metric that is important to engage with when you're designing and building. And then, you do, I think, want to we measure daily active users. One of the things that prides us very much at Cloudzero is that we don't have just one or two FinOps people logging into the platform, but we have the engineering teams logging in, the other people, the people who are out there doing that. But don't focus on the tools first. Focus on getting people to actually understand the importance of this.
Okay, one more question.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amna from PepsiCo, and I have a question for, during the process of merging the engineering optimization methods with the traditional optimization methods, did you experience any pushbacks? And if so, how did you educate the various teams like finance, engineering, FinOps about why this is the best way to view your data or go for cost optimizations?
Yeah, I would have to give another talk just about this. I'll try to be brief. Agreeing on how we're measuring and then people understanding what's the measurement was super key. Second thing was just agreeing that we're doing that for the company's best interest, was less about you're doing an awful job or a remarkable one either. And also putting those things into perspective. It wasn't about I think it's very easy for us to think the only thing that people should be doing is cutting costs. But at the end of the day, we're also delivering a healthy business. So that is another part of the equation. So our idea was more to provide information and then make that very easy to act upon, rather than trying to force people to take action. was much more about, here's everything you need, super easy. If you want to have that quick win, here's how you do it.
Fantastic. Well, from both Vitor and I, we want to thank you all for coming and being part of this conversation. It's hugely important. We hope to continue it. Come find us wherever we are. I would be remiss or probably shot by my marketing team if I didn't say that we have a booth over there. But find us someplace. We'll be on the aircraft carrier tonight. And Rob, and to the FinOps Foundation, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Erik and Vitor, thanks very much.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.